Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. This story is about a guy named Jason, y'all. Jason was your typical 17-year-old. You know, he loved girls, sports, cars, all of that kind of stuff, playing video games. You know how it goes, right? Yeah, but he was also, a mama's boy. And a lot of guys are like that. There ain't nothing wrong with that. I was a mama's boy, you know what I mean? So I don't see anything wrong with that. And he loved playing football and basketball and all that kind of stuff, right? And he would tell people, that he would meet that, his brother and his father, they taught him how to shoot basketball. But his mother, she's the one that taught him how to play the game, right? Teaching him to always give it all he's got, play hard, leave it all on the court or leave it all on the field. Respect your opponents by giving the best game that you got and be a gracious loser, you know what I'm saying, by making sure that you respect the fact that somebody was better than you that day, not making them a better person than you, but in that particular event they were better than you. She taught him all those types of lessons that have meant a lot to him in his life, right? She was just, a plain old sports fanatic, right? And she used to run and shoot with him, practice the game with him, do all of those types of things, right? So when Jason turned 17 years old, his mother got sick and had to be rushed to the hospital. And while he sat in the waiting room with his brother and his father, his father pacing back and forth, all nervous, not knowing what's going on, right? He just wondered what was going on in the back about his mom. And about an hour later or so, the doctor came out and told him the bad news that she didn't make it. They did everything that they could, but she had died from, at the time, he'd never heard of this term, an enlarged aneurysm in her brain. It burst and it killed her, right? And this really tore him up. And so he got to sitting down and telling me his story. And I think that, for him, this is more than a story. Because he laid it out for me in a way that I want to make sure that you understand and appreciate what he went through. Because his experience did more than put him in prison. His experience did more than take his freedom away. He became somebody that he's certain that his mother wouldn't be proud of. So let me tell you his story, right? In his words, okay? My name is Jason. After my mother's death, I spiraled out of control. I started drinking and smoking every day. My senior year in high school, it was very hard for me. I continued to play basketball and football, but it wasn't the same because Mom's wasn't there. My pops showed up to the games, and my brother did too when he could, right? But it was different when Mom was there. I tried to move on, but I couldn't feel the void that I felt in my heart for missing my mom. My mom was the center of my world. Now, when I wasn't smoking and drinking, I was always on the internet trying to read and understand what it was that the doctor said that my mother died from. And even though I saw the pictures of the aneurysm, and I saw how it would burst and what it would do to a person's brain, when I saw all of that, it still made no sense because my mother was healthy. My mother was in a lot of situations, she was in better shape than I was. But all of a sudden one day she just fell down and died and left me all alone. And I couldn't process that. I couldn't understand that. And it just messed me up. And my lack of understanding, it fueled the anger that was simmering beneath the surface of my pain. Now, near the middle of my senior year, my life took a turn that I would have never, ever imagined and don't wish on anybody. I was sitting at a stoplight, waiting on the light to turn green, when I noticed that the driver in the car next to me, he was punching on this female passenger, right? And when I got a better look at the woman, I noticed that she was pleading with this man to stop hitting her. And before I knew what was happening, I jumped out of my car and I ran around to the side of his car. And keep in mind, traffic is everywhere. This is at a stoplight. So it's cars parked on the other side of us and behind us. But I ran over and he was so focused on beating this woman that he didn't even see me when I snatched the door open and grabbed him and pulled him out of the car. And I started beating him. And I just kept hitting him, and kept hitting him until his body went limp. And he just lay there on the ground, not moving. The female, she had jumped out of the car and ran to him and was yelling at me, "What have you done? Why are you hitting on him? Why are you doing this?" And I just looked at her like surprised and not really understanding what she was saying because I was zoned out. Now keep in mind at this time the light had turned green and the cars were moving. They were just driving around, or some of them, but I noticed some of the cars had pulled over to the side and I could hear sirens in the distance. The police had been called. They were on the way. And I sit there. I didn't run. I didn't do anything. I just sit there waiting on the police to get there. And it dawned on me all of a sudden that I had done something crazy. So I got up, walked calmly back to my car, got my phone, texted my brother and my father and told them that I loved them and that I had done something stupid. Now, right at the time I finished sending the text, I was turning the phone off and I tossed it back into the car and the police said, "Get on the ground." I turned around at them with my hands up in the air and I got down on my knees. Then I leaned forward and got face down on the ground and they told me to put my hands behind my back. So I put my hands behind my back and two of the officers rushed me and put handcuffs on me and then they set me up. And they started asking, what's going on here? They see the man lying there. They called for an ambulance. And the ambulance, you could hear it coming. And the woman was holding this man. It turns out that this was her husband. She was holding him in her arms, saying, yelling, "He killed my husband. He killed my husband." So the police, one of them grabbed me to throw me in the back seat of the police car while the other officer ran to the woman to try to help her. And I noticed as I'm in the back seat, I'm looking out and I see him with the man and he's saying that I have a pulse. He's not dead. So when the ambulance gets there, they get him and they get him on the gurney. They get him in the back of the ambulance and they speed off, heading to the hospital. They get him to the hospital and they do what they do, right? Now I'm on my way to the police department. The police are taking me to the police department to question me. No lights no cameras that were that I could see that could show what happened. Other than the people, there's people everywhere, so there's plenty of witnesses to what happened. But I'm not fully aware of what it was that I had done. I just totally blinked out. And now I'm sitting in this police department, in this room, and this officer's asking me, "What happened? What have I done? Did you beat this man?" He's saying all of these things to me, right? And I'm telling him, "I don't know what I did. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Why do you have blood on your hands?" And I'm looking down at my hands, and I'm thinking, I must have done something. I had to have done something. So I started crying, and I told him, I did it. I beat him. So the officer, he said, "Why did you beat him? Why did you do it?" And I said, I don't know. I told the officer, I said, I saw him hitting her, and I just spazzed out. So the officer asked me, at this time, the detective had come in. So the detective asked me, did I know her? Did I know him? And I told him, no. I don't know who they are. He said, so why did you seeing him beating her piss you off? I said, I don't know. So after about an hour they stopped questioning me. And they had me sign a statement that they had written based off of what I had told them. I didn't even read it. I just signed it. And then they arrested me and charged me with, they said, attempted murder. Because he didn't die. I thought he was dead. But they charged me with attempted murder. And they put me in the jail and locked me up. A couple of days later, a lawyer came to see me, said that he had been hired to represent me by my father and my brother. So I told him everything that I remembered, and I didn't remember any more than I'd already told the officers that was in my statement. And he looked at me and he said, "Can you tell me about your mother?" And I said, with a little anger, I said, "Why are you asking me about my mother?" And he said, "Well, your father and your brother told me that your mother has recently passed away and that it was real hard for you." And I told him, "Yeah, that's true." I said, "I miss my mother." And he said, "I understand that." And he told me that his mother had passed away years ago and he understood what that meant. I didn't care nothing about hearing all of that. You know what I mean? I really wanted to go home, but I knew I wasn't going home. I had never been in any trouble at all. And I just lost it. And I knew that things were going to be different for me, but I just didn't know how different they were going to be. So he told me that he'd be back to see me. He was representing me. And he said he had me a bond hearing coming up. And he was going to try to see if the judge would allow me to be released on bond because, you know, I had never been in any trouble or anything like that, right? So about 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a visit from my father and my brother. And we're all crying at the visitation. It's non-contact visit. Non-contact visit, that means it's a glass between us, right? So we're all at the visitation crying. And I reach out to the glass to touch him. And I just couldn't touch him. And that did something to me. I had never felt like that before. I had never felt like that emptiness. It's like I couldn't touch my own family. This glass was in the way. And it made me really, really sad. And I started to think about my mother. So when I went back to the cell that I was in after the visitation, I tried to kill myself. And the inmate that was in the cell with me, he got the attention, thankfully, of the officer that was on duty. And they got me. I tried to hang myself with a sheet. And they got me, and they cut me down, and they took me to the hospital. And then they brought me back to the jail a couple of days later. And they put me in isolation under suicide watch. So while I'm in there, my lawyer comes to visit me. And he's talking to me, and he tells me that he thinks I have a good chance of making bond. But they were concerned with me making bond because of my recent suicide attempt. Now, I told them that I would be okay, but they didn't really know what to make of that. So they were going to make sure that I talked to a therapist when I was released. That was going to be a part of my conditions if I were fortunate enough to be granted bond by the judge. So we went in front of the judge a couple of days later, and the judge granted me bond, and I was able to get out. My father put up his house and some cash, and I was able to get out. And now I'm out on bond. But I have to go see a therapist 3 times a week. And my father has to pay for that. My brother helped him pay for it. So I'm going to see the therapist, and I'm learning a lot of things about myself that I didn't understand, that I was suffering from abandonment issues and all of this, that attachment that I had to my mother. It was weighing on me. And my therapist thought that, my attacking the man for hitting the wife was somehow my way of protecting my mother, not losing my mother again. It's real confusing what he was trying to say, but it all centered around the loss of my mother. And I just did not want to see someone beating on a woman. And I understood a little bit of what he's saying, but mostly it confused me. But I saw him 3 times a week, and after about 6 months, it was time for me to go to trial. So when we went to trial, I was not offered a plea deal. So we went to trial for for attempted murder. And my lawyer had the judge got the judge to agree that when they went out to jury, that they would be able to consider the lesser included offense of manslaughter, a lesser charge, or assault, all those lesser charges. So we go into the jury, and everything's being presented to the jury. All the evidence is being presented to the jury about what I did, pulling up at the stoplight, seeing this man beat a woman and turn out to be his wife. And she got on the stand and testified that her husband was abusive and that he had done this multiple times, and that me stopping that like it may have saved her life and all of these different types of things. But still, there was no excuse for what I did. And they found me guilty of aggravated assault. And gave me 12 years. I got 12 years for the aggravated assault. They considered that I was going to a therapist, and considered my mother passing away and all of these different types of things, but they still sentenced me to 12 years, and I was very, very bitter about being sentenced to 12 years. I felt like I was out of control, my life was out of control, and nobody was trying to help me. And to throw me in prison for 12 years wasn't going to change that. It was not going to help me. So I was angry when I went into prison. I was really, really angry when I went into prison. I felt like I was a victim too. I'm not making light of what I did. I'm not taking away anything of what I did to that man. I'm not doing that at all. But what I am saying is that I was suffering. I was suffering too. And the answer that society had given me was to put me in prison for 12 years. That's how my mind was taking that. I know now that wasn't right, but that's how my mind was taking that. So, I get to prison, and I meet this dude named Max. And when I met Max, I learned the lessons that I needed to learn to make it in the environment that I was about to be spending the next 12 years in. And it was those lessons that I learned that helped me survive this environment. And I'm going to break down to you in this next episode some of those lessons that I learned. And I'm going to explain to you what that made me think, how that made me feel, and how it made me act, so that you can fully understand how this story is going to teach you what you need to know about how prison will change you like it changed me. Tune into the next episode, y'all. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.
I'm getting